Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go after the lefts, we go after the rights, we go after the middle and independents, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Hey, guys. Welcome. Today's date, April 24th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means we do try to do our best to give you nothing but the facts from award-winning journalism sites. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, Newsmax, The Blaze, The Daily Beast, or whatever extreme left or extreme right that you may subscribe to. We give you the facts, just the facts, nothing else. We also do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there might be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this? I think we need to start this on some good news, because for all those that fly, even though I really don't fly, I've kind of got a little small fear of flying, but I know on days when I need to fly, I'll cowboy up and do it. We all know the cancellations, the holdovers, trying to get connecting flights, trying to get credit, things of that nature. Well, out of all this that happened, Pete Buttigieg, our Department of Secretary of Transportation, may have actually done something that makes the airlines very nervous. Here we go.
Money in your pocket fast if you get jerked around by an airline. You get a cash refund in delays of 3 hours or more, and also much more transparency in all the fees you are charged for almost everything when you fly. With us now, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for being with us. So my flight gets delayed 3 hours. What happens and why?
Well, bottom line is you get your money back, and you get your money back without having to ask. Look, a lot of times what's happened is there's a scenario where you get delayed a long time, so many hours that maybe you wind up booking a different ticket, same day, more expensive on a different airline, because otherwise there'd be no point in traveling because you're going to miss the meeting or the wedding or whatever you were heading out to do. But then you go back to your original airline and they say, well, look, we didn't cancel the flight, so you're not getting your money back. Now you're out the original airfare and the extra money it costs to get this new ticket. That's just one example of the kind of scenarios that we hear from passengers time and time again. We're putting a stop to it now. From now on, when your flight is canceled for any reason, you are entitled to an automatic cash refund, and it has to be prompt. If you get delayed significantly, that means 3 hours domestically, 6 hours internationally, or if there's another significant change to your itinerary, like maybe you were going to go into one airport, they actually changed the airport on you, or something like that, you're going to get your money back. And importantly, you're going to get it without having to ask. Another situation we see a lot is you get a cancellation or a disruption. The airline says, we're so sorry, here's 2,000 miles. And maybe that sounds good, but that's worth $20 when actually you are owed hundreds. So this is all about making it simpler for passengers, and also with this rule, new provisions about the information that you should get up front so that you know before you buy a ticket what some of the fees are that are connected to that. We're seeing a lot of these hidden fees, junk fees, and it's not a free market if you don't know what you're getting or how much you're paying before you make that commitment to purchase a ticket.
Nick, it is a tense.
Well, he's 100% right. Again, if you ever flew before, it's a pain. Trying to get credits back, trying to fly, things of that nature. This actually does help quite out a lot because, again, I've heard the horror stories. I myself have never really ran into it, but I've heard the horror stories of trying to get your money back, trying to get your miles back, trying to get anything for the airline to actually do anything short of accountability. So I guess with these rules going into place, it's weird that we're not seeing a lot of pushback from the airlines yet because, again, until we actually have a mass transit rail system, unfortunately, airline travel is the fastest way to get to anywhere. So at least there's some good news that, you can get refunds reasonably and you can get cash because, let's be honest, airlines are quick to give out credits, but they are very slow to give cash. But I digress. But other news I want to get into because this is kind of going to Trump. we're not going to really go into the case that he's in right now, just because every news cycle is doing this. And that's the one thing that I cannot stand, that every news cycle focuses on what is Donald Trump doing in this? What is Donald Trump doing in his live court case? Is he smiling? Is he mad? Is he frowning? Does he need a brownie? Does he need a hug? Who cares? It's a court case. Tell us something more. Tell us something. Again, this is going to all the news segments, because almost every news outlet is covering this, and I don't understand why. The man is basically on trial for hush money payments that were done during his election, and that may involve a former porn star. Let's just wait to see what happens afterwards, because it's a federal case. It's one of the very federal case. It's one of the very, I would say multiple case I was looking for. One of the very multiple federal cases out there that we're just waiting to see whether or not he gets indicted. And if he's indicted, he's found guilty. But dear God, from ABC to Fox to everybody, we don't need wall-to-wall coverage of Donald Trump in court. How about just give us what happened at the end of the day, much like you would do like going to ESPN when you can't catch basketball games. Just tell us what happened. That's all we need. But a thing that you should be concerned about, however, the New York Attorney General Letitia James. Why? Well, basically because she's saying that she's asking the judge to void the bond. Keep in mind, this was the same judge. This was the same AG that basically won her case fair and square against Trump for mishandling the values of his properties in order to secure higher bank loans, to the point to where there was a judgment of in excess of $464 million, one that Trump could not pay. But he also said that it was egregious. We found out that later, somewhere between the 11th hour, between Sunday night and Monday morning, of when the time of him paying the bond would run out, that somehow the appeals court said, oh, well, the $464 million is unfair. We're going to give you $175. And then he found Knight Securities Industries, a bond held by a person that mainly deals in subprime loans, is the one that's going to certify the bond for $175 million, which again is all cash Donald Trump had to put up while his case gets appealed. Here's the problem. Letitia James, at least Miss James, is saying that in her court filings that basically Knight Securities may not have the necessary funds to withhold this. She does say that quote unquote KIC does not have an exclusive right to control the account and will not obtain such control until it exercises the right to do so on 2 days' notice. Just keep it more that she also says the company has never before written a surety bond in New York or in the prior 2 years in your jurisdiction, and has a total policyholder surplus of just $138 million. This is slightly less than the $175 million bond that Trump needs. So again, this is going to be interesting, because keep in mind what a lot of the financial analysts out there were saying. They were saying that, trying to secure a $464 million bond would be impossible. And of course, because it now knocked to 175, which Trump still claims, keep in mind, this is a guy who claims that he's one of the richest men in the world. Okay, 175 million should be a problem for you. But as we saw what he did with Truth Social, forming his own media group, putting it for public trading on the New York Stock Exchange, let's just say the man's broke. But here's the thing. If the judge does listen to this, and if the judge does actually revoke the bond by Knight Securities, that means that the original judgment that's put in goes into effect. And unless Trump can cough up $464 million of his fines, let's just say that a lot of his properties will basically be up for sale. We're looking at you, Manhattan. But again, we'll cover that as it goes along. But other things we should be worried about, guys, like I said before, there's other things going on besides wall-to-wall coverage of Donald Trump's trial. More like the Supreme Court, because currently right now the Supreme Court is basically arguing over whether or not ticketing homeless people is a cruel and unusual punishment which violates the Eighth Amendment. Keep in mind, there are several different cities out there that are dealing with homelessness, tent cities, things of that nature, by simply removing the individuals from eyesight. But they're not actually doing more for affordable housing, they're not actually giving more to social programs. They're pretty much trying to remove them from out of sight, out of mind. Now, the Supreme Court, again, this is the thing that bothers me about the Supreme Court, that it's overly conservative. And of course, you see things of this case like Of course, the fact that homelessness becomes a public health hazard and fire hazards, especially with homeless encampments in certain areas, understandable. But again, we're living in a country that has plenty of housing, even though it's out of reach for some people. At the same time, they're not actually addressing the sociological issues. Like, again, if you're not getting paid enough to actually afford rent, or getting paid enough to actually get them to be able to sustain it or be able to get a house. Those things pay a lot in attention. So again, with the Supreme Court looking into this, they could rule that it does or does not violate the Eighth Amendment. Here's the possible problem I have with this. That, again, this is the conservative Supreme Court. The same Supreme Court that overturned Roe versus Wade, the same Supreme Court that gutted partial college interest for affirmative action, which relatively killed DEI everywhere. This is the same people who could possibly listen to a former failed president's case if he decides to cry hard enough. So forgive me again, whenever it comes to a conservative-leaning Supreme Court, I am definitely not that positive that they may rule in favor of, well, basically humanity. But we will see as that goes along. So now that we've covered those two things, I think we need to go ahead and cover the elephant in the room, shall we?
Capitol Hill, the Senate passing a sweeping $95 billion package, including aid for key U.S. allies, and laying the groundwork for a ban on TikTok, putting an end to a months-long political stalemate.
Finally, America sends a message to the entire world. We will not turn our back on you.
Lawmakers voting 79-18. The package includes $60 billion in aid to Ukraine, $26 billion for Israel, which includes humanitarian relief in Gaza, $8 billion for Taiwan, and a potential TikTok ban. Congress voting to outlaw the popular app, which has 170 million American users, unless its Chinese owner ByteDance finds a buyer within 9 months. TikTok has been encouraging its users to fight the ban, but Congress citing national security concerns with China's potential access to extensive personal data and its possible platform for propaganda.
At the end of the day, they've not seen what Congress has seen. They've not been in the classified briefings that Congress has held.
FBI Director Chris Wray telling Lester Holt exclusively Tuesday.
TikTok, for us, represents a national security concern. And the reason I say that is that TikTok's parent company is beholden to the Chinese government.
But as TikTok vows to fight it, the ban will likely be delayed in court. The aid package passing after a major showdown on Capitol Hill, with House Speaker Mike Johnson facing a rebellion, many Republicans objecting to Ukraine aid. Johnson now adding in sanctions on Iran and Russia, and a few Democrats objecting to Israel aid due to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But now, most on both sides relieved the bill's long journey is over.
We can wish for a world where the responsibilities of leadership don't fall on us, or we can act like we understand that they do.
Ryan, a lot in this package. Let's focus on that potential ban on TikTok. I mean, it's essentially regulating TikTok and saying you got to sell, the Chinese government can't be connected with the ownership. So how might this actually play out over the next few months?
Yes, Savannah, it's not like the app is going to evaporate from your phone this morning. We expect to see a massive legal battle between TikTok and the federal government, pitting the First Amendment versus national security. And TikTok has cited free speech as part of their argument, and they've had some success in court after multiple federal judges blocked a similar effort from former President Trump back in 2020. That wasn't codified law, though, at the time. So that's why this is a little bit different. Now, despite that steep price tag, there is even the potential that someone could emerge as a buyer. Former Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said last month that he was looking at putting together an investment group, but that all depends on ByteDance or the Chinese government, which hasn't shown positive signs they want to sell. And then just last week, China removed Meta's WhatsApp and Threads from its app store over national security concerns.
So what's interesting about this is, guys, is just that, number one, as much as I'd like to say that whenever we report something here on How the Frack We Got Here, we want to report it properly. We want to report it to where there's no misinformation. We want to report it that it's accurate. We want to report it that, of course, you can trust us as a definite news source. That being said, because a lot of people are running with the clickbait ad that Congress has passed the ban on TikTok. Congress has approved a package that includes the fact that the ban, of course, keep in mind, quote unquote ban is being used. Well, basically their package is saying to ByteDance, who owns, again, for all those that don't know, ByteDance owns 20% of TikTok. The other 80% is owned by private investors. The reason why this company is so far is under this microscope is because they are a Chinese company. And of course, anything that deals with China is always a matter of national security, if you let the way the CIA and the FBI tell it. The thing is, they claim that there is an issue of national security with this company having the metadata that's being used for TikTok. Keep in mind, TikTok, for everybody that's been using it, has honestly been a great resource. I mean, a lot of people have started TikTok shops. A lot of people have expressed their views. I mean, it's not like X. It's not like X, formerly known as Twitter, where, let's be honest, if we're comparing that to anything, that's the wasteland and fallout right now. But as far as TikTok, it is probably one of the last bastions of free speech. But what amazes me so is that they don't. I mean, thankfully, in that article that we played, we did see that they had to explain that yes, the ban may not go into effect or may not go into effect at all, because considering ByteDance has 9 months to sell out their stock, which they may not. At the same time, nobody's asking the question of, again, with this ban happening, we're still sending billions of dollars to Taiwan, Ukraine, and Israel. Billions with a B. Keep in mind, Americans already have enough time making ends meet, already have enough hard times with your tax refunds not being what they should be, already have enough time with getting taxed to death. And we're sending billions of dollars to overseas with no with nothing. But it's amazing where out of the entire bill, like this is how bad they want to get TikTok. Which again, I love how Chuck Schumer says, well, the world is paying attention. Is it though? Because we just sent $1 billion overseas and you still have your own citizens and constituents trying to make ends meet on a Wednesday, and the paycheck is another Friday away from here. But the world is paying attention. Yes, the world is paying attention because apparently we have enough money to still fund wars, but can't take care of our own people. But back to TikTok for a second. ByteDance has 9 months to whether or not they want to sell. At the same time, there'll be legal issues along the way that could also prevent this from happening. At the same time, who's not to say other apps will appear? Because as they said, they said that Meta and its Threads apps was removed from the Chinese side, citing security issues. Do you see the BS there for a second? Because anything that's ever said to be national security, immediately they turn around and go, it has to go. I mean, it's not the fact of the matter that just, I don't know, the fact that it's not a US-based company, the fact that its metadata and algorithm are not available to the US government, the fact that you have US investors like Munchin, like Zuckerberg himself, that are itching to get a piece of this, that are willing to, and who's not to say Zuckerberg himself? Keep in mind, Zuckerberg single-handedly tried to kill MySpace. Actually successfully did it. At the same time, his metadata was been released multiple times. Your private messages that you send to Facebook were read by Netflix. So the metadata that TikTok has is unavailable to the US side until ByteDance sells it. That's the profit. The profit right there is the algorithm and the metadata there, because that is the new digital currency. So therefore, TikTok is looking very, very good to US investors because they know they can make a mint. But the problem is, once something is that heavily taken over and it's watered down, TikTok will be what YouTube and Facebook are now. Heavily regulated, freedom of speech is taken away. Pretty much it's not what it should be. So I can see the freedom of speech is I cannot believe that the one time Democrats and Republicans actually band together on this bill seems to be over a social media app. Lord knows it couldn't be over minimum. It could be over increasing the minimum wage. It couldn't be over actually fixing our healthcare system. It couldn't be over fixing our immigration system. It could be fixing our VA systems. But a social media app seems to be the rallying cry for both sides. I'm just saying. The ban isn't going into effect anytime soon, guys. So I'd say enjoy yourselves for now, at least. But some other goods, but going away from that news, I wanted to get to this for a second because I have to talk about my home state of Tennessee, which again, born and raised, but it's effing progressively backwards is what it is. The reason why I said that is because we actually had a great thing happen. This past week. For all those that don't know, Volkswagen has a factory here in Tennessee, specifically Chattanooga. Because of that, the UAW, or United Auto Workers Union, were looking to basically start a union at this plant. This plant has been there longer than I've been on this earth, and it's never had a union. And in the South is anti-union. It really is, only because former businessmen that are politicians will always say the union's bad. Right to work is good, even though right to work is BS. But they hate unions. Why? Because unions force them to be accountable. Unions actually get benefits and better pay and better conditions. That's why I say it all the time. Unions work. People only complain about unions because A, they're on the other side of it, or B, they're the ones that have to argue against the negotiators. But again, I've been saying this the entire time as we have covered multiple strikes out there that have happened. Unions work. And with that being said, what actually happened in Chattanooga, specifically at this Volkswagen plant, they basically certified. The Volkswagen plant there, as you can see right there, with the president of the United Auto Workers Union himself, basically celebrating the fact that unionization did win by a landslide here. So that means that there will be a chapter of the United Auto Workers Union at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga. And it's great because and here's the thing about it. This is what's unheard of. It's 73% of the workers, 73% of the workers voting in favor of the union in the South. That is amazing. That's the thing I've been trying to tell people. The fact that was 73% of the vote to unionize is amazing. At the same time, does that mean that we will be seeing unionization at the Volkswagen plant? Absolutely. Does that mean that the other plants, because keep in mind, Tennessee has other ones. They have the Nissan plant here in Smyrna. They are about to have the Ford plant near Jackson, Tennessee, that's currently the ground being broken upon. And then another plant is going to be hopefully in Memphis, Tennessee. But here's the thing. The thing that I just find interesting is that the South needs to change, because you have folks who have benefited. And I say this all the time, folks who have benefited from the fact that we don't have unions, folks that have benefited that we don't have protections for right, we have this stupid right to work, which again, right to work has nothing to do about right to work. Right to work basically means that a job can fire you for any other reason outside of discrimination. That's it. If you breathe wrong, you're fired. You come with the wrong shoes, you're fired. You press the wrong latte at the interior coffee room, you're fired. That's what right to work is. They can fire you as well as you can walk off the job, which I think is stupid as far as analogies, because you can walk off any job you want to be a part of. Right to work is just an excuse for companies to fire you without actually having to go through the entire unemployment benefit stuff, because they can actually block you from getting that too, depending on what county you're in. But I digress about this, that the unionization that's happening in Volkswagen at this plant in Chattanooga is great. There's supposed to be another one at another plant in Alabama, which again, just goes to show you that the South, thankfully, although it should have changed a long ass time ago, pardon my French, but it's finally changing. At the same time, here's the funny part about all this. The current idiot that's our governor, Bill Lee, and yes, if he ever comes across this podcast or my publications, yes, he is an idiot. Yes, somehow he keeps getting reelected. Yes, idiots keep reelecting him. So technically, if you did vote for Bill Lee, you're an idiot. There, I said it. But what Bill Lee says is that he thinks that the unionization was a mistake. Really? A business owner that thinks unionization is a mistake. He sat there and says, quote unquote, I think it's unwise to put your future in somebody else's hands, but those workers made a decision based on the individual circumstances of that plant. I think it was a mistake. It was their choice. Really? Only business owners who are, here's the thing I will point this out. Only business owners who are terrible at being a people person will be the first ones to sit there and say, oh, unionization is bad, because Amazon tried that. Amazon said for the longest time when unionization got bring up, why do you want to unionize us against us? We pay you the most. We give you benefits from day one. Why do we not? I mean, aren't you being treated well? And anybody that's ever worked for Amazon, either worked in the Amazon warehouses or driven for them in those trucks, will say otherwise. It is amazingly so how they marginalize the fact that unionizations matter. At the same time, if it wasn't for unions, guys, you wouldn't have 4-day work weeks. You wouldn't have PTO. You wouldn't have paid sick leave. You wouldn't have paid sick leave. A lot of these things that you have with a regular job, you would not have if not for unions. And I keep saying this all the time, unions work. And of course, leave it to our governor to sit there and say it's a bad idea, because keep in mind, Bill Lee's call to fame was the fact that his family owns an HVAC business here in Nashville. That's it. And imagine if that HVAC business actually had a union. I would be laughing my ass off. But the reason why they keep on saying it's like, well, it'll kill jobs. They'll do that. It'll kill jobs. Unions kill profits. Now, keep in mind what they usually say about that whenever unions happen, right? And I want to bring up this story because keep in mind, the big three just actually went through this sometime last year. When I mean by the big three, I mean General Motors, I mean Ford and Stellantis that owns Chrysler, Dodge, and all the other makes and models. Remember the fact that UAW went on strike with them to basically redo a new deal with them. And at the same time, the Ford and GM were trying to say, well, our profits are going to take a hit and things of that nature. We can't afford to pay workers. And again, forget my French, but here's why I say it's bullshit. Because General Motors has just reported their first quarter net income rose more than 25% on strong deliveries of pickup trucks and other higher profit vehicles. So let me get this straight. General Motors that sat there and said, if we unionize and pay these people more, we would see a drop in profits. Your first quarter net income says that you've made more than you projected, 25% more than what you would make. This, guys, is why I say, and again, forgive my French, it's bullshit. They want to keep profits. Here's the thing. Those companies want to keep as much profit as they can by paying as little out to the workers as humanly possible. That's the game. The game is they want to pay as little. They want to get away with paying as little as they can, but want to keep as much profit as they can. And the fact of the matter is, the UAW was right. There's enough piece of the pie that they're not asked to be millionaires, but they're asking that their job should be enough to sustain themselves, their families, the house or the mortgage, house or rent, depending on the situation, cars, living expenses. If you are giving your blood, sweat, and tears to a company, the company should pay you enough to where you can live off of, to where you don't have to take a second job, or you don't have to take assistance, or you don't have to do side job hustles unless you absolutely want to. And that's the thing. The fact that you have one of the big three actually turning a profit after that whole fiasco about not paying their workers just goes to show you that there's enough money to go around. They just are profit greedy and refuse to share. That's just all it is. But shifting gears for a second before we go back to Tennessee, because something else did happen in Tennessee, which again needs to be talked about. But again, this is the one thing I always find it weird whenever we talk about Israel and Palestine and Hamas and Gaza, that it is amazing to me that the reach that whenever it comes something toward Israel, that there's always a cause and effect. What I mean by that is Google just recently fired 20 workers over the protest of technology that Google is supplying the Israeli government during the war, which means that, come to find out, not only has it been 20 workers recently, but the number of terminated staff that Google has fired because of this is approaching 50. Think about that for a second. That you have people that work for Google that sit there and say, you know what? I don't like the fact of how we are supplying the Israeli government because of their atrocious acts on Gaza and Palestinians, and the fact that this seems more like a one-sided thing. And what Google decided to do was say, okay, you no longer have a job, which goes to show you how messed up that is. That again, everybody's like, well, it's freedom of speech. You shouldn't go against your job. But again, you have the right to free speech. Now, again, you're not absolved from the consequences of what happens next. But I think that Google actually firing people for just having a difference of opinion, that alone should tell you something. Because, of course, the way the company says it, they say, quote unquote, every single one of those whose employment was terminated was personally and definitely involved in disruptive activity inside our buildings. What disruptive activity? Because here's the thing, what's considered destructive, really? Did they just say that we need to protest? Were they organizing something? What exactly did these 50 individuals do to where they didn't like the fact that you were supplying the Israeli government with technology and support, that you think that, I don't know, that they decided that they were going to do something about it? This is why I sit there and say that it's always against Israel. You don't ever really see it on the Palestinian side, which kind of suggests to me it's a little bit one-sided. But that's also the other thing I want to point out too, because just like the young lady who was a valedictorian at USC that we covered last week, we are starting to see more and more protests against the Israeli war happen on campuses. Now, you would think for campuses that are trying to educate and stimulate young minds and encourage freedom of speech, most campuses are turning into modern day Gestapos.
Over the Israel-Hamas war, protests continue erupting on college campuses across the country. Dozens of arrests have already been made at some of the nation's most prestigious universities like Columbia, Caltech, NYU, MIT, even Yale.
We will not rest this long.
We were all just sitting cross-legged together in a circle. And then the NYPD came in and arrested us one by one, immediately zip-tied us with our hands behind our backs.
So police in riot gear have been breaking up the crowds and arresting hundreds of protesters over the last few days. But despite those police efforts, the protests do continue to grow with encampments at the center and of campuses. Also, some students are barricading themselves inside the schools. Columbia is now announcing that it's moving to hybrid learning for the rest of the semester after some protesters engaged in a standoff with authorities following an order to vacate. Our Stephanie Ramos is still right there in the middle of it all in New York City. Stephanie, clearly we see more police, but what other steps are the schools taking to try and de-escalate the situation and put an end to these protests?
Well, we've certainly heard from the administration here at Columbia University. They've said that they wanted to double up on their campus public safety officers across campus. A bit hesitant to call in the NYPD, even though we've seen the NYPD officers here at Columbia University and here on Broadway and also on the other side of the campus. Basically, it's tight security here at Columbia University. But they have stepped up their campus public safety officers, and we're seeing we were here yesterday, Kira, by the way, I just want to mention, and yeah, we saw a lot of NYPD officers on corners, surrounding the campus, and they seemingly had their riot gear on, helmets, batons, but at no point did we see them engage with any of the pro-Palestinian demonstrators or those that were pro-Israel, just right next to those pro-Palestinian demonstrators. However, that's obviously not the case at other campuses across the country. Even here in New York City at NYU, it was a much different story there. We know that security is very tight there at NYU, which is south of us, but that is the current situation right now. We don't see any demonstrators here right now at this very moment, but that's what we saw yesterday, where it was kind of on and off throughout the day.
So Colombia's protests really have gotten most of the attention up to right now. So what are students actually looking to achieve at these other campuses? And do you know if all these students have sort of been online communicating and coordinating these protests?
They have, and it seems as though many of the students at these other campuses, from what we've heard from the videos that they've shared online, is that they are setting up camps, they're setting up their tents, and they are marching, they're demonstrating in solidarity with the students here at Columbia University. Many of them chanting and yelling here outside of the gates at Columbia University yesterday that they want the university to divest from companies that are benefiting from Israel. Many of those demonstrators are not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing for this, as they've done before in years, not them specifically in years prior, but what they've seen historically. So many of those demonstrators spreading the word, not just here in New York City, but obviously across the country.
And finally, Stephanie, what are you hearing firsthand from students and professors participating in these protests? I know you've had a chance to talk to a lot of different people.
So one Jewish student in particular that we spoke with yesterday said that she understands that there are demonstrators that want to have their voices heard. They have a message. They want the university to fulfill to fulfill this certain goal. But there are also demonstrators, she tells us, that are intimidating the Jewish community here and harassing. And this is why the Columbia University students have an option now whether to attend their classes online or in person. We're also hearing from demonstrators that say they want their message heard. One professor telling me that this is a very delicate situation, of course, but there are many factors that go into this. And we have some sound from him. Take a listen.
I don't know. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I know that these students are incredibly brave to be demanding that their administration, who they are paying a very large amount of money, divest from Israel. So what I know is that it's only actions like these that are capable of making these kinds of changes.
There are some students that we spoke with yesterday that were set up on campus. We are going to have an opportunity to go on there and see if they are still there. But again, there are many demonstrators, whether students, people who are not affiliated with the university, and professors from other colleges that say they will not stop. Back over to you.
So it's crazy that when you look at the situation, that this is no really different than when the Vietnam War was going on. You had protests about the war then, and you still have individuals who, again, it just feels like anything that deals with Israel just seems to have immediately cutoffs or immediately shot down. But it's amazing that these are college students that are paying for their education, students that have the right to protest, the right to peacefully protest, and that college campuses would rather shush them away or get law enforcement involved to have them moved. And I wonder why. Because again, I'm asking this question the whole time, that what is it that every time accountability is asked of Israel, that immediately we get the shh, don't say anything. Why do we get that? It's so much, like I keep on saying this whole time, when it comes to history, if you look at the history between these two countries, just seems that something is a little one-sided. And Netanyahu is the biggest welfare queen of them all, who, again, I keep saying this, with as long as the U.S. is involved in the Middle East, this all can be solved by doing one simple act. Pull the funding from Israel. Because Israel, without U.S. support, whether it's army or money, they will fold very quickly. I'm just saying. But we'll follow that story as it goes along, because these protests are not ending anytime soon. But what actually is happening, guys, which again, I stress this very heavily, that public education is under attack. It really is. If there was a war on anything, it's public education. The reason why I say that is because just recently from the Census Bureau, that enrollment is falling nationwide. Keep in mind, falling. And this is public school. You know, the schools that some of us did go to. They sat there and said, from the Census Bureau that the children of ages 5 through 17 enrolled in public schools almost fell by 4% from 2012 to 2022. And keep in mind, this is comparing that 87% of children were enrolled in public school in 2022 compared to 90.7% in 2012. Now, again, I hate to point this out because sometimes it's always if you want to look at the problem, look at the South. In Kentucky, it decreased by 8%. In South Carolina, it decreased by almost 8% there. And in Alaska, it's decreasing by 7%. Why is that, if you may ask? Is because a lot of these states are giving up on public education and are trying to push this stupid voucher system. And I cannot stress this enough that, and I'm not saying this is all for private schools and charter schools. Some charter schools do actually follow the public school system. I am talking about the private and charter schools that just, are looking to take that public funding that public schools get, and they want a piece of it. Keep in mind, this is from public schools that get tuition from the students' parents and from other funding, especially from religious backings, like some churches do actually fund their Christian schools. But because of that, especially here in the South, that thankfully they tried to push a voucher system that literally and figuratively would have killed public schools, because they try to say, well, if you take this voucher, you can send your kid to any school that you prefer. There is a reason why schools were zoned. There was a reason why at one point teachers were taken care of. There was a reason why education was vital, because if you had education, less wars, you had smarter people and fewer soldiers. Some would see that as a good thing. But now with public education being attacked, you have teachers who are underpaid because, again, I can point this out all the time when it comes to that, especially in Nashville, where the median, keep in mind, teachers usually get paid between $45,000 and $66,000, but that's on the good side. If you're lucky as a teacher in Nashville, you'll be lucky to make $54,000. That's saying a lot. Now, keep in mind, $54,000 in this day and age, especially in Tennessee, is not enough to get it's not enough to get it's not enough to get a 2-bedroom apartment. You definitely forget rent, forget groceries, forget utilities. That's what most teachers, luckily, if they're luckily make. Some teachers actually make less. As you can see right there, the $54,000 is the median, which means that some may get it. But again, that's just the only tip of the iceberg when it comes to public education. The other tip is how they're treating it. Again, overcrowded classrooms. You have unruly children who do not listen to educators. You have seen the multiple social media videos out there where teachers are basically have their hands tied while kids can do whatever they want, and that's completely unfair. At the same time, how they test these kids. They're not teaching them to read and understand. You're basically getting them to read and understand a test. They're not learning. And we can chalk this up to the fact that COVID just sent everybody to remote learning. We can chalk this up to the fact that this has been an underlying problem that has now just reached the red line area, and now a lot of people are paying attention to it. But again, there's a certain group of people out there, the GOP, who are taking this as an opportunity, because leave it to Republicans to destroy something so badly that the only way that you can save it is to privatize it. And they tried to do that here in Nashville. I talked about the idiot Bill Lee not too long ago, that he wanted to turn around and do a voucher system here that nobody wanted. Keep in mind, nobody wanted this voucher system because these voucher systems do not work. They have destroyed funding. The only people that win out of these things are the charter schools and the private schools that get this. And I keep on saying this, and I will say this for as long as I live. If you are a private school, specifically a religious school, you do not deserve public funding. There's a reason why church and state were separated in the first place. If you're taking federal dollars, you have to be non-denominational. You have to be. Because again, it makes no sense that you're funding a church with state money. But thankfully, it did not pass far. The voucher system happened. But unfortunately, the next part that I'm about to talk about did happen, to where, again, for some odd reason, whenever it comes to gun control, and again, I am a gun owner, but whenever it comes to gun control, especially here in Nashville, we just had a shooting happen at a school just now going on 2 years ago. that, again, we asked for gun safety. We asked for stricter guidelines. We asked for our state legislature to do something. This wasn't it.
Chaos erupting in Tennessee's state capitol, where lawmakers just passed a bill that would allow teachers to carry concealed handguns in schools.
This is the reaction of rage, hurt, and anger.
Emotions were high as protesters descended on the House gallery, waving signs as House representatives voted 68 to 28 to pass the bill following the state Senate's lead. It's one of the biggest pro-gun moves by the state since the tragic shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville last year that killed 6.
We are being blamed for putting guns in schools, but the purpose of it is to protect our children.
32 other states passed legislation allowing teachers to carry guns in schools as states across the country grapple with how to address school violence. If signed by the governor, the Tennessee law would allow teachers to carry guns in schools where top administrators agree. The teachers would be required to have a permit, do training, and get a background check and mental health evaluation.
Currently, it's just one of those gun-free zones where people know they can go there and take advantage of folks.
The bill now heads to Governor Bill Lee's desk, who is expected to sign it soon.
Every person that dies at the hand of a gun in this state, it's on their hands.
Tennessee becoming the next state to arm educators in America. Priya Sridhar.
So let's think about this for a second, guys. Because what is amazing, what is really amazing about all this, right? That if we think about what they just said, you're asking underpaid, tired out educators that, hey, we're not going to pay you more, but we are going to make sure you're armed. You want a live firearm put in a classroom. Scratch that. You want multiple firearms within an educational facility. This is coming from the same group of people who voted on this that wouldn't allow that in their own chambers. And what are you doing? You sit there and say, oh, well, if you're going to own a gun, you have to have a permit, you have to have training, you have to have a background check. At the same time, you have to go through a mental health evaluation. Time out. Wait, this came from the Republicans? Wait. Have a permit, must go through training, must pass a background check, mental health evaluation. Weren't these like the same things that Democrats sat there and said for universal background checks and other gun control that, again, Republicans were all saying, well, nobody will do that? It is amazing that Republicans sat there and said, you know what, just copy the Democrats' homework, but just don't make it look obvious. But on top of that, it's never a good idea to arm educators because, again, bringing a live firearm into an environment with children will never be good. And the reason why I bring that up, guys, is basically because of this. A Tennessee teacher arrested after bringing guns to preschool and threatening to shoot a colleague. This individual, again, was charged with assault, threats of mass violence at a school, and 2 counts of carrying a weapon on a school property regarding an incident that happened at the academy in McCrory Lane, where she says, quote unquote, she threatened to retrieve a firearm and make threats against another teacher and the school after an argument. Here's the messed up part. If Bill Lee signs that actual bill that gets passed, that's already passed, what happens there is legal. But again, think about that. This is why I say you can't just arm teachers, and you shouldn't. That's not their job. Teachers' jobs are to educate. Teachers' jobs are to make sure children are safe. But bringing a live firearm into an actual environment with kids is so much more dangerous. And it needs to be admitted so. Just because of the fact that I brought up one story where literally it just happened. That one teacher had disagreement, and what's she going to do? She went back to get her gun and bring it into school. And yet you want to arm multiple teachers the same way. Do you see why I say Tennessee is progressively backwards and why Governor Bill Lee is an idiot? Because he will sign it, and a lot of people will think it's a terrible idea. including the same people, but only the people inside that chambers, along with Sexton, that's a whole other story, will think it's a justified idea. This is why I keep telling you guys, come election time, wherever you are, please pay attention to who you vote in, because you may get a group of idiots like we have here in Tennessee. That's all I'm saying. But we're going to go to move on to our feel-good segment, because usually how the Frack We Got Here, we cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes lose your hope. Sometimes make you lose your faith in humanity. Sorry, words are just hard right now. But we want to leave you guys on some good notes, some good vibrations, as this is Wednesday and tomorrow is pre-Friday, which is Thursday. And I don't care who you are. As a Disney character, you get excited when you meet them. And this Kid's Wish made me smile a little bit, because it's actually one of my favorite Pixar characters.
Our play of the day, and the youngster who's very excited about a really cool superhero. So take a look at 6-year-old Zaire, who got to meet his idol Frozone from The Incredibles at Disney World. Yes, so maybe he was a little shy at first, but then Zaire sure warmed up to Frozone, who taught him how to assume the typical superhero pose right there. Zaire's smile melting hearts across America.
Oh my gosh.
Look at that.
That's
Love
why
that.
representation matters.
Got the muscles to go with it, too.
Adorable. Gio, we need you.
I don't care what no one says. That's always hard when we actually meet your characters. At the same time, we always remember Frozone, because only a man who can take one line from The Incredibles and gets recited in homes everywhere. Where's my super suit? If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you do. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. Thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here. Shout out to Vaughn at Big BZA. Definitely check him out, Big BZA on all social media. Also, check out blurredstation.com, guys. I cannot stress this enough. This is the new media. This is our Netflix in a way, to where you'll be able to see quality television, quality movies, shows like Issue 1, Undead Horizon, Blood Emblem. I can keep going on, guys. At the price of $10.99 a month, you cannot beat that, especially the fact that everything else is going up, content is moving. But in this case, the content here is here to stay. And if you are a content creator that would love to join Blurred Station, guys, again, you have to join Blurred Station first, and then you'll be able to make your pitch. But the beauty part about this is, guys, is that the content that you do make, you do keep, is that Blurred Station just gets a piece of the distribution, which, again, not a bad deal. At the same time, paying $10.99 a month for 36 months, guys, you do get the ability to own a piece of Blurred Station. So definitely check that out. Hit the Join Now button. Again, if you are joining, please go into the Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership. Again, select anybody there. We are all for the cause, but we would certainly appreciate it, because, again, this does not move forward without you. Of course, guys, with me, Black Spartan 61, Black_Spartan 615 on the socials. I do reviews on everything. Catch me here on How the Frack We Got Here. Catch me on Get Bit Podcast Friday. Catch me on Blurred's Eye View on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do a lot. To keep busy. But again, also the link at the bottom, guys. I'll make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, take my link to the YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit off of this podcast. Like, share, subscribe, get the notifications icon on. Much like PBS, guys, we don't move forward without you, because, again, liking, share, following, it costs zero. It only takes you a second to do. So we hope that you'll do that, because, again, we can't move forward without you guys. The movement is real. Like I said before, guys, we are getting to the middle. It won't be too long before we get to our presidential nomination votes. I mean, at this point, it's pretty much going to be Biden, and it's going to be Biden and Trump. And I keep talking about not just the national, but the local, because you just heard me talk about Tennessee, where our legislation, outside of a handful of great people, most of them are idiots, but they were voted in. So unless you are doing your part and getting to know these candidates, getting to know their issues, to see if their values jive with yours, do so. And at the same time, if you believe that you can do a better job of running in politics, there's plenty of sites that show you how to get elected in your own area, or how to run in your own area and hopefully get elected. So definitely do that. My whole job here at How the Frack We Got Here is to inform and to hopefully encourage, because, again, misinformation is rampant out there. But the only way we beat this, guys, is that we have to hold things accountable. At the same time, we have to do our job. Vote. If voting was not so important, they would not be trying to run the gauntlet to make sure your vote was definitely not being counted. Yes, I said it. But the last thing I'll say about how the Frack We Got Here, guys, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical, progressive presentation and perspective to go along with it. We do a lot better than once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Congress, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black woman as a national security advisor. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up at our paycheck? Why are we looking at different politicians but still the same old gang in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll get through this. Peace.